All right, well, hi again, everyone. Thank you again for being with us. It is fantastic to have you, as always, for our Early Efforts webinar series. My name is Dan Worry. I am the Senior Director of Early Learning at the Hunt Institute in Cary, North Carolina. For those of you who may be joining us for the very first time on this edition, we are an education policy support to governors and state lawmakers and other senior state elected and administrative policymakers in education. Our work really covers the full spectrum from prenatal on up through post-secondary and workforce, though here on this particular series, Early Efforts, our focus is obviously the years of early childhood. We know that the earliest years are critical in building the foundations for lifelong success, and perhaps nowhere is that as readily evident as in language and literacy, which find their roots well before children enter the K-12 school system. Today, we have gathered an amazing panel, representatives from 4 terrific programs across the country with an early literacy focus to help us break all of this down. With us today are Christie Yamaguchi, who is founder of the Always Dream Foundation. You might know Christie as a children's book author, or you might know Christie as one of the great Olympians of this nation's history, the Olympic women's figure skating gold medalist at the Albertville Games in 1992, a 2-time world champion, just to name a few of Christie's accomplishments. We only have an hour, Christie, so we can't list all of them, but we're so delighted to have you with us. We're also joined by Kyle Zimmer, who is the co-founder and president of First Book, which we will get into. Brian Gallagher is the CEO of Reach Out and Read. And Carolyn Krolot is joining us from Los Angeles. Carolyn is the director of dual language learning programs at Early Edge, California. And so we'll talk a little bit with Carolyn about the needs of dual language learners as they are developing their early literacy. It's so great to have all of you with us. Thank you first for just taking the time to have this conversation. Want to get in, there's so many different facets of early literacy that we could talk about today, and we'll get into some of those over the course of the hour, but wanted to start by really giving all of you a chance to sort of introduce the programs that you work with to the audience who may not be entirely familiar. Kyle, but we'll start with First Book, if that's okay. I want you to tell us a little bit about the work and the goals of First Book and how you pulled them off around across the country.
Sure. Thanks, Dan. It's a real honor to be here with you and with Christie and Carolyn and Brian. I feel like we are soldiers in the same army, all of us. And so it's a real joy to be able to share and listen to what you guys are building. First Book is a nonprofit social enterprise. We're in our 30th year, and we've always approached our work by trying to address the barriers and needs of kids in poverty from a 360-degree perspective. So we've done this by building an online community that we believe is unprecedented. It includes everybody in the life of kids in need from 0 to 18 years of age. In every conceivable setting. So Title I and Title I eligible schools, after school programs, preschool, homeless shelters, barber shops, the full range of institutions that as a community support kids who need our help. And right now we have about 520,000 members in that community. We are growing it at about 1,000 new members every week, and that's been true for a couple of 3 years. And so what we do with that community is we really use that as a big lever to learn from them and to apply what we learn from them to address their needs. So 3 big interlocking models are what support our work. The first is called the First Book Marketplace. You guys may know a little bit about this. It's an e-commerce site. It's all nonprofit, and it provides free and low-cost books and educational resources to anyone who's registered in our network. We move about 17 to 18 million books annually through the system. And because of the community and the market strength of that community, we've been able to really work to decrease the price of really wonderful award-winning books. The average price on our site is about $3.80. And that's including shipping. And so we want everyone to go onto the site and check it out, please. The second of the three interlocking programs is called First Book Research and Insights. We've gotten better and better at listening to our network and listening to, like, for example, the over 100,000 of them that have identified themselves as early learning educators. And so we listen to them, and we've built a research arm, First Book Research and Insights, as I said, so that we not only can First Book benefit from hearing from the practitioners on the ground, but also so that we can share our findings with the full field of everyone, all of these folks and many, many others who are working in the same channel. And the third and final one is called the Accelerator, which allows us to, while we listen and we hear the needs of the practitioners, whether it's early ed, whether it's literacy, whether it's child development, social emotional learning, race and inclusion, we take the Accelerator and we identify who are the thought leaders who have developed really brilliant strategies that can be implemented by our practitioners. And we make those strategies readily available through the First Book Network so that we collapse that delay between the thought leaders and the people in the field who need their help. But that's a quick overview, Dan.
Fascinating, Carl. Thank you so much. I want to dig into all of that more here over the course of the hour. Did want to mention, I should have done so at the beginning. All of our early efforts webinar series are closed captioned, and so we'll invite you, if that is a service that would be helpful to you, please do click on the closed captioning link down there at the bottom of the Zoom bar. At least on my screen, it's at sort of the bottom right, and invite you to avail yourself of that. Christie, I want to turn to you, and definitely want to hear all about the work of Always Dream and what it exists to accomplish and how it accomplishes it. But I guess maybe the first question that I had, in thinking about your founding of the foundation, which, by the way, happened, I believe, 25 years ago. I think there's a milestone anniversary this year. But just curious, with the great platform that we mentioned earlier, your great success in the Olympics and profile that afforded you, I'm sure that there were sort of every topic under the sun, as you looked at going into kind of a philanthropic venture here and using your influence for good in the world, you could have gone in many, many different directions, obviously. What was it about early literacy that really captured your attention?
Yes, thank you, Brian, and great to see all of you here, and honored to be on this panel with all these amazing panelists. But yes, I think, 25 years, the last 10 years, we've really turned our focus onto early literacy and developed a program to target kindergarten age students. And really the impetus there was being a mom. I think at the time, about 2010, 2011, our kids were 4 and 6. So at that learning to read age, and looking back, my husband and I always felt the best advice we were given as parents when our first daughter was born was read to her now. And she was maybe 3 months old, and we kind of like, really? And the pediatrician said, yes, like she needs to hear those words. She needs to see you pointing at pictures and telling her what things are. And all of this is helping those connections in the brain. And we really saw that love of reading and books develop in both of our daughters at a very young age, and benefit them as they became kindergarten ready and starting school. And I think when the foundation, when Always Dream was looking for that place to really go narrow and deep in, we looked at different things in sports, in healthcare, in education, and it just really felt, hey, if we want to help these kids go after their dreams, which Always Dream is all about, is really giving that support and that inspiration and motivation to go after their dreams. It's going to be a lot harder for them if they don't have that foundation of education, literacy, and we wanted to be able to provide books to those families who didn't have books in the home, focusing on the low-income kids and help them really create that, have those resources, the tools, everything they needed, the family engagement support to create that reading routine at home, and therefore give them, something to springboard off of to, get their education started on the right foot. So ultimately, our goal would be that, like everyone's here, right? Close that opportunity gap, close that digital divide, so that eventually none of us are needed. But of course, we see that, the literacy rates here in our country alone deserve that attention, and it definitely needs it. So really, that's how Always Dream, became focused on early literacy, and, really trying to develop a program that targets the youngest students out there.
That's fantastic, and I so appreciate you bringing up, Christie, the idea that even at 3 months, I think a lot of it seems actually sort of an odd idea on its face that that a baby that small who is has not developed kind of language in the sense that they will as they grow would benefit from that. And so I think it strikes a lot of parents as sort of an unusual idea, but the truth is that we've got research even that suggests that parents that begin reading even in utero, that there are reactions that young children even prenatally start responding to the sound of their mother's voice. Even in utero, and that the language and literacy are not things that begin on the first day of kindergarten. Certainly are grown over time, which is actually a really lovely segue to the work of Reach Out and Read too. Brian, I want to bring you into the conversation. Reach Out and Read is obviously a very prominent national model that partners with pediatric medical homes in helping to support early literacy. Tell us a little bit more about the work of Reach Out and Read, and why might pediatricians play a special role in helping to promote what Christie was just talking about?
Yes, thank you. I think, Christie, you gave maybe the best advocacy we could have about describing that exact experience. That's Reach Out and Read in a nutshell at that early visit with your child, talking about just the benefits and joys of reading aloud. So thank you for that plug. It wasn't planned. But really, Reach Out and Read is all about access to children and families in those early years, and leveraging the pediatric system. And that's really where Reach Out and Read began, was just this idea of a near universal system where children and families with young children were accessing for their health care, and yet a unique opportunity with the pediatric care provider who was talking with them about all the things that were so important in that child's development, and reading aloud, and that shared experience being a key part of growing up, starting in infancy. And so today we're a network of over 6,000 pediatric clinical locations in all 50 states, with over 30,000 pediatric providers, including pediatricians, family physicians, nurse practitioners, serving about 4.5 million children ages 0 to 5, in a place where they're already going for guidance and support and care. And so these pediatric providers are incorporating our model of encouraging reading aloud in book sharing as part of the well child visit. It's intended to be kind of a seamless part of the conversation that occurs during those well child visits. And at each checkup, the provider is giving a book to that child, an age appropriate, culturally responsive book that's selected just for that child, to really have that conversation about why reading aloud, why sharing books, why having that shared experience is so important. And while providing a book is such a core part of our model, it's really about so much more, because Reach Out and Read is really all about promoting healthy relationships and really providing those foundational relationships, using literacy as a vehicle for that connection. You know, that opportunity to just put that baby, that toddler on your lap, and kind of having that moment with the caregiver, the child, the book, all around, you know, the story, the words, the language, the voice, the pointing. You know, we always talk about how it doesn't even have to be about reading. It can be about, you know, telling other stories that some of the pictures might elicit. So it's really, how do we ensure that children grow up with these special moments together with loved ones in that experience, which when added up, you know, over weeks and months and years, can really be quite profound. And so why pediatric care providers? You know, I think number one, there's the access that they have, but also because these relationships, these early relationships, and the shared experience really are the foundation for so much that's going to come, you know, as children go into kind of more formal education settings. So this idea that pediatric providers can prescribe reading aloud, prescribe going to the library, prescribe you know, finding more books, finding story time, putting the phone down, you know, sharing that book, whether it's a bedtime routine or on the bus ride home or just you know, at nap time, that those routines are so important, and a part of that advice that they literally give the tool to go home with the child that helps with that advice that they've been giving.
And so important too. I think there is a credibility. You know, the pediatricians, particularly for new parents, sort of bring, that is built into that equation. You know, no matter who you are, everyone who is a parent is a first-time parent at some point, and so, you know, having that pediatric provider there to emphasize this is just so important. Well, Carolyn, let us turn to you next. We, you know, I know I referenced in your introduction that you lead the dual language learning programs there at Early Edge California. But I thought maybe before we jump into sort of the needs of dual language learners, take a chance, like your fellow panelists have, and introduce us a little bit to the work of Early Edge California and where early literacy fits into that mix.
Yes, thank you so much, Dan. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you so much. And with my esteemed panelists, thank you so much. I'm excited to share about our work at Early Edge. And so Early Edge California, we're an advocacy organization focused on increasing access to high quality early learning programs for children birth to age 8 here in California. And our focus areas really include supporting the early learning workforce, and also ensuring that dual language learners receive the supports that they need to become bilingual and reap the benefits of bilingualism and succeed in school and in life. And in response to your question about how early literacy fits into our work, you know, research really shows that the first 5 years of life are critical for brain and language development, including literacy development. And so our work of expanding access to high quality early learning programs really helps provide those building blocks and support that children need to develop the necessary language and literacy skills in those early years that will help really set them on the foundation for success throughout their school trajectories. And recently here in California, our organization was instrumental in advocating for the expansion of Transitional Kindergarten, which is an early learning program for 4-year-olds here in the state. And this program now will become universal by 2025, which will result in universal preschool for all 4-year-olds here in California. And we know that having access to 1 year of high quality preschool is especially positive for children from low income communities. And there's also evidence that transitional kindergarten is particularly impactful for dual language learners So this historic investment and policy change will really be critical for supporting the development of children's early literacy skills here in California and really setting them on the path to success. So we're so excited about this.
Carolyn, thank you so much for that introduction, and thanks to all four of you for helping to sort of set the stage for today's conversation. Did want to mention to all of you who are viewing today that we will carve out time toward the end of the hour for some conversation stemming from your questions, and so I invite you to go ahead if you have questions throughout the course of the hour. If you want to drop those into the Q&A function there within Zoom, we'll pull up some of those questions and pose them to the panel here in a little bit. Chris, I want to return maybe back to the work of Always Dream. We talked a little about sort of the importance of early literacy, and I want to talk a little bit more about kind of how the logistics of how the model works. I know in part that you were providing actual kind of physical traditional books, but that there is also kind of an innovative technological approach here to sharing books with families through the programs at Always Dream. Talk to us a little bit about that technological piece in particular and how it works.
Yes, no, absolutely. And, I think going into 21st century learning, it was, realizing we had to embrace this digital age. And, introducing it to such young students, I think was a shock 10 years ago. But as we've seen through the pandemic, with distance learning, with the struggles of the parent engagement support, with all of this distance learning is really the area we want to address. And we did that about 5 years ago as we designed the current model of our reading program. Our target audience is kindergarten age students, and we are expanding into pre-K and TK this coming school year. So we're excited to have our program with a 2-year continuum with the students. But it's really three-pronged. We use the digital technology to provide access to the digital books, and that helps us provide more books than they can carry in their little book bags. But also it allows us to collect data, and we're able to see how many books they've read, how many minutes, maybe what families are struggling and need a little bit of outreach from our book coach. So all of this, the technology allows us to do that. So we do provide a tablet one-to-one with each of our students and families with access to a digital book library. The second prong is really that family engagement piece, and we feel that that's our most important piece. And providing that support that the caregivers, the parents need to, one, understand how critical their role is in their child's learning, but also give them the tools where they feel comfortable in playing that role. And they receive text messages 3 times a week from us that are gentle reminders. Oh, hey, there's 5 new books in your library, maybe pick one out and read to your child today. Some literacy strategies and, things that they can use as they're sitting down to read with their child. And also we do have a book coach that is assigned to certain schools and students. Actually, they address all of our students, but we have 3 current book coaches, and they reach out and provide additional support when needed. And, when we do see a family who, let's try to get them a little more active, they'll reach out and have a protocol in place to really try to get them back on track. And, that relationship of the book coach kind of being in between the teacher and the families has really proven very invaluable to the schools we work with, and able to really develop a relationship there that's pretty close with the families. So yeah, it's combining that digital technology and knowing that we are able to collect the data, but then also provide more access to the families, which is, what we really want to see. Choice is so important for the kids at this age that it's nice to be able to say, hey, if you want to read about butterflies, you can read about butterflies or baseball or whatever. And, that is going to give them, I think, more interest and develop that interest.
That's fantastic. Just as a sort of a semantic aside for everyone watching, I know both Christie and Carolyn have referenced California's Transitional Kindergarten, or TK, and just as a note, that is what in many states is really just referred to as pre-kindergarten or 4-year-old kindergarten. In some parts of the country that we have worked with, that transitional kindergarten terminology in some cases can connote special education programs, for example. And so just for everyone's benefit as viewers, we're kind of talking about California's recently expanded pre-kindergarten program, which is referred to as TK in the state. Christie, curious, you mentioned the benefits of the technology in terms of providing access to books that would match particular interests, but I was so interested in the data component of being able to sort of keep track of who's reading and when they're reading, and what do you feel like are the big lessons maybe that you have learned as you all have looked at the data? Are there ways that the data has jumped out in ways that have enabled you maybe to retool approaches to make things more effective over time?
Yes, it definitely has. And I think it has allowed us to, being fairly small still, make quick pivots into our program. And, we learned, one way to really help engage the students even more is giving options to the teacher. And we found that sometimes the teachers are maybe doing a lesson on something specific, construction or tools and things like that. So we open it up for that teacher to have that option for our book coach to curate a library that surrounds that particular subject. And, that we found has really helped engage the students and the families, and really include the teacher as well, if they choose to do that. But, the technology also helps understand maybe what subjects are being picked out, if the books that we curate, because on the platform we offer, there's thousands of books, but that can be overwhelming at times. So we also do curate a smaller collection and push about 6 to 10 books out every couple weeks, so that they can, have a little bit more narrow focus, and it coincides with the text message and the reading strategies that are pushed out as well. So, it helps us, streamline a little bit more on the content that the kids are receiving, and the families with the reading strategies.
I just love the potential for the research and the data that comes through there. That's fascinating. And so, speaking of research, Brian, I wanted to raise to you. I mean, Reach Out and Read has such wonderful research, not only on the program, but sort of referenced on the website about sort of what happens in the brain when when parents and children are interacting. We've got studies now that show that that sort of reciprocal interaction between parent and child helps to activate different parts of the brain that are associated with learning to read. Just among many other things. It must be kind of an overwhelming feeling to know that you're having that impact on even the architecture of the brain at a young age.
That's right, and I think that's we've learned so much over the past several years about the early brain, and how those critical moments really are essential for building that brain architecture. And again, just the idea that will only happen through the interactions, those positive, healthy interactions with with loving caregivers, where they hear sounds and then they can look at pictures, point out words, and thinking about all of the opportunities. Every page is an opportunity to kind of create those learning moments, and children and families aren't even realizing that they're learning through that, and they're really creating those synapses that occur. And I think that's why Reach Out and Read has been so successful in expanding and really continuing to integrate into the pediatric setting, because the pediatric providers know the benefits of that. And we've even seen more and more growth within our model, because our footprint has continued to grow primarily through embedding into pediatric residency programs, family practice residency, where they're learning about exactly the research you're talking about as part of their training. And then they're learning about how this model can help with a lot of other conversations that occur in the well-child visit, and make it very concrete and not an abstract idea. That here's the one thing you can do that's very practical, tangible, accessible, starting right now, that's going to create this experience that will have lifelong impact on your child's learning, your child's development. And so the response from the pediatric community and the family practice community has just been overwhelming, because of that evidence pointing to this low-cost model and the effectiveness that it has, with a huge ROI downstream.
That's fantastic. And you referenced the training. That was one thing I wanted to ask you about the model, is how do you go about, as a new practice maybe takes on Reach Out and Read, how do you go about supporting those pediatric practices and communicating this kind of information to parents?
So we really want to focus on quality. This isn't, as I said earlier, just about getting books out. It's really about that interaction that occurs, with that guidance in the context of the family's environment. And so that we have a training module that all of our pediatric clinicians take as part of their kind of onboarding process. And we take a public health approach. So we don't want this just to be one individual clinician's pet project, within a clinic. We really look for the whole clinic to embrace it, and not just the clinicians, but the administrative staff, so that they can reinforce the message as the children and families are walking out with a book, and they can ask, what book did you get, or kind of reinforce that message. And so we're seeing a lot of that growth coming from residents who've trained in the model, seen the model in action, and then as they're going out, because Reach Out and Read is not yet universal, sometimes the first thing on their list is, where are the books? How do we get books into the clinic? I've got a 6-month-old that I'm going to see in 10 minutes, and I don't have a book. So they'll reach out to us. We have an online application that's pretty straightforward, doesn't take too long. We review those monthly, and just to give you a sense of scale, even in 2020, when we, during the midst of the pandemic, we started over 300 programs, because of the demand from the pediatric community, seeing the value in this, especially in the moment of a crisis like the pandemic, when these moments of just normalcy and spending time reading aloud and supporting children however we can seemed in many ways more relevant than ever.
Absolutely. Kyle, want to turn to you, and First Book's mission has so much resonance, I think, to me and to so many, because it is so much about ensuring equal access to quality education, and making sure that things as fundamental as books are available in the home. I know you've been kind of pursuing that mission for gosh, 30 years now as part of First Book. Talk about the progress that you've seen over that over that time, and what do you think? What is the role that increasing access to literacy materials, for example, plays in helping to support that development?
Well, I think there's been a lot of progress. I mean, you can hear it, in the growth of just the programs we're learning about here, the heroes who are right here on the screen with me. And And I'm really hopeful about it. I think we need more collaboration in the field, and First Book takes that role very seriously. I think that is one of the reasons why we prioritize harnessing that voice of the practitioner and really listening to exactly, because yes, of course, books are better than no books, but the right books are even more important. And so we will listen. I'll give you a couple of quick examples of the kinds of things we do with the data that you were referring to earlier, the importance of that, Dan. We heard early on, years back from our network that they really wanted a bilingual, very hungry caterpillar. And I suspect that everyone on the screen can recite that book by heart. But what existed at the time, there was an English edition and there was a Spanish edition, but there was no bilingual edition. And so we were able to listen to that and to approach the publisher and say, this is a powerful book. It will be more powerful for this group of kids and families and their teachers and their educators and their healthcare providers if we can get a bilingual edition. And because we've got the big lever of this large audience, we were able to go in and purchase right out of the gate 30,000 copies. So that enables the publisher to step forward and address that need. And now, we're more than 100,000 copies through First Book, and it's been released at retail, and it's great. So you do see the progress being made. Publishers are, because of all the work, the collective work that's going on, publishers are finding new avenues to elevate diversity of children's books. This is particularly important for the age range that we're talking about today, because not only is it critical to have the right book in the hands of the kids and families and caregivers and teachers, but it's also for literacy and the development of reading skills, but it's also exactly these years when kids begin to form racial identity and the concept of other people's racial and cultural identity. And so the ability to hold hands across all of the organizations that we represent and all of the folks who are doing this great work, like represented today, and to elevate that voice, to elevate that need, because literacy is primary, but we also have a lot of other categories that we can serve by doing this wonderful work. And I'll say, in addition to the books, what is critically important is that we expedite the best strategies for, if Christie learns, as I'm sure she has from her data, that sending 3 texts a week is a real power tool to engage parents. Well, First Book is in a position to work with Christie and say, let's send that message to the 100,000 members of the First Book Network who are right there in the lives of kids, right now. And so we have the ability, we work with Ellen Galinsky, when she rolled out Mind in the Making, and to help, bring that kind of powerful thinking through to our members, so that through tip sheets and parent guides and webcasts and all kinds of things, so that the power of those strategies, when paired with the right books, it really has extraordinary strength.
Absolutely. Kyle, thank you. And Carolyn, Kyle did a lovely job of setting us up for a dual language portion.
That was my goal, Carolyn. That was my goal.
You all are so good helping to transition from one to the next. Carolyn, I was so fascinated to see it. I don't know if the rest of the country always fully appreciates it. A fascinating statistic on Early Edge's website that talks about 60% of children in California living in households where a language other than English may also be spoken. So I wanted to ask you, to weigh in a little bit. Obviously, language and literacy learning, are in some ways somewhat universal across language. Those same kinds of high quality, reciprocal, parent-child and caregiver-child interactions are important for children who are, speaking languages other than English as a first language. But talk a little bit about what are the maybe more specific needs that maybe dual language learners bring to the early literacy conversation that policymakers need to be kept aware of.
Yes, thank you. And as you mentioned, dual language learners represent the majority of children birth to age 5 here in California, and they're also a large and growing population of young children across the country. And unfortunately, what we've seen is that on average, DLL children enter kindergarten behind their peers in language, literacy, and math. But here at Early Edge, we're working to address this gap before it begins by advocating for investments and systems changes that will ensure that DLL children have the supports that they need. And these include things like ensuring that teachers have access to high quality training on how to support their dual language development, and then also ensuring that we're expanding dual language programs so that DLL children really have the opportunity to become fully bilingual and biliterate. And what research tells us is that when children have a strong foundation in their home language, it actually helps and facilitates their English language development and their literacy development. And it's often thought that, in order to support dual language learners' development in English, we need to expose them to English as soon as possible, as early as possible. But this can actually be very detrimental if English comes at the expense of their home language. And so instead, what children need is, the opportunity for continuous development of their home language and English. And then also the research is very clear that the most important window of opportunity for language, literacy, and bilingual development are those first years of life. And so the earlier that we can begin to support children's dual language learning, the better off they'll be later in life. And we know that bilingualism comes with many benefits, including cognitive, socio-emotional, cultural, and even economic benefits. But children can only reap those benefits if they have the continued opportunity to develop their biliteracy skills. And so we can do this at home by families speaking their home language, developing their home language, reading books and bilingual books. So great work that Kyle's organization is doing in providing those bilingual books. And then also at school through dual language programs, for example. And then I also wanted to take the opportunity to share about an exciting project that we've been leading in partnership with over 30 organizations based in California and also nationally. We're getting ready to launch a website, which we're calling Multilingual Learning Toolkit. It's focused on resources for supporting pre-K through 3rd grade multilingual children. And the website will present the most effective research-based principles and instructional practices for working with multilingual learners pre-K to 3rd grade. It's geared towards teachers, administrators, and teacher trainers. And we currently have nearly 200 resources available on the website that they're intended to really help educators get a sense of what does it look like to implement these research-based best practices that are included on the website. And so we're excited about the website and really feel it will be helpful for teachers to better understand the needs of their multilingual children. We're launching the website at the end of August, and we're hosting a live virtual launch event on September 2nd, 10 to 11 a.m. Pacific time. So I'll drop the registration link in the chat for those who are interested in joining and learning more about the website and the resources that will be available.
Carolyn, that's wonderful. Please do drop that into the chat, and furthermore, follow up and make sure you send that to me. I'd be happy as follow up to this session today to send everybody by email the link to that so that they can get registered. What a wonderful resource. We're going to transition. I want to invite you again. If you have questions for the panel, please feel free to drop them into the Q&A. I want to go ahead and jump into to some of those questions. One of which actually transitions nicely into a question that I was going to pose to the panel as well. And on a happy note, a question that comes from a gentleman who very well could be on this panel himself, Dr. Bob Saul, who is a wonderful pediatrician in Greenwood, South Carolina. Asked, and maybe Brian, I'll pose this to you because I think it has maybe the most direct applicability to reach out and read. But Dr. Saul was noting that because of COVID right now, that previously, not only in a pediatric waiting room, but also in the exam rooms, it was not uncommon to have children's books and toys and things available that that they could use to help model some of that, and that at least for the time being, that has been deemed not to be terribly safe during the pandemic. So Bob's question, which I'll combine with my own, is his question is any ideas on sort of how physicians are dealing with that and what they might do to replace that example there in the exam room where they might be able to model some of that. And also then, maybe we'll start with Brian, but extend to everyone, would be interested to know how the pandemic has affected, the work that you've done over the past year and a half, and, where you have had to make changes, and maybe any, silver linings. I think we have found in a lot of ways, and, kind of unexpected cases, that, that there are things that maybe have caused us to rethink things in better ways as a result of the pandemic. So I'd be curious to know. But Brian, well, let's start with you.
Sure, and I'll start by saying this question is probably as old as Reach Out and Read, with germs in the waiting room and books, and so we've dealt with this question on and off over the years, and each institution is slightly different with their protocols and requirements. But obviously, yes, we did see a significant shutdown and putting away of anything that wasn't bolted to the ground in the waiting rooms. But I do think we had a study that come out, which was conducted by a few Reach Out and Read pediatricians a few years ago, pre-pandemic, about this question of, do children's books transfer germs? And the answer was generally no. They don't, any more than doorknobs or anything else. And so I think I do think we'll see the return at some point of physical objects, especially in waiting rooms and children's books. I think there's certainly more benefit to having books available, but appreciate that we're not there yet. And this is, I think, where partnerships really do come into play, where, the more we can promote, in the waiting room, other resources, other community resources that exist, partnerships where they can go get more books, or even thinking about, opportunities to go digital where that makes sense. We really encourage our sites to just connect with those local communities. Think about, again, the library. They're still giving out books, and so another opportunity to just promote the richness that exists around literacy and a lot of the examples we're hearing today. And then, from the Reach Out and Read perspective, on the kind of what did we learn, I think there was certainly concern in the spring of last year and into the summer about, especially young children not going into the clinics for their vaccine. And so we've always partnered with the American Academy of Pediatrics, which conducted a Call Your Pediatrician campaign to really encourage the return of children who may have missed those visits. And that's where, again, we saw this, can books be an incentive to encourage families to go back? And so we're continuing to experiment with that and learn from kind of where there may be resistance to going back, or even to, in the context of vaccines, once we get to that point for younger children, how can books play a role there? So I think we continue to just see that reading aloud, sharing books, even in a time like this, was more important than ever.
Wonderful. Kyle, any ways that the pandemic has touched First Book in ways that you've had to adapt the model, or maybe lessons that you've learned during the pandemic?
Yeah, I feel like we learned a tremendous amount during the pandemic. In one way, our systems actually were at their best during the crisis, because we were able to reach out almost instantly and get feedback for what was needed, what the strategies were going to be to continue education as schools and preschools and other settings were closing. And we heard, much to your question about the accessibility of books, that we ran a survey literally as the doors were closing, and we heard from thousands and thousands of our members saying, I think it was 81% said to us that their number one need for their kids were physical books. And because they knew that many of the children and families they were trying desperately to hold on to from an educational perspective didn't have computers or didn't have connectivity. And they saw that as the way, especially through our high diversity Stories for All titles, for them to build that, to strengthen that bond in the midst of a crisis. I will say, Dan, one of the things that I think was completely heartening about this period is watching educators and caregivers, especially for the youngest kids, what they were willing to do, what creativity and dedication they brought to their jobs when their own families, like all of our families, were at risk, in those early days where we really didn't know much at all. And we reached out to our network and got a very strong response. We said, what do you need? What can we do? How can we keep the resources flowing? And something like 8,000 of our members stepped up and in a million different ways. They were like running distributions for daycares and preschools and classrooms out of their garages. They were putting bags together and doing doorstep deliveries where they knew there were kids living in the houses, and being able to feed that because of the generosity of our publishers who provided us with something like 14 million books during that period was extraordinary, because so many people were working their hearts out to try to make sure that that connection with the families and with the kids who needed the help the most, they really needed it. And so I, as we were all working day and night, I'm sure this is true of all of my colleagues here on the Zoom call. And but it was very, very heartening to watch the dedication and how creative they were to try to build those and maintain those connections, those bridges.
Absolutely. Cal, thank you so much. And we've got just a couple minutes left before the top of the hour. It's some really wonderful questions in the Q&A. So I want to try to throw out at least a few more of those. And Christie, maybe we start with you on this next one, though I think it is applicable probably to all of our panelists. Question here about how you accommodate within your models working with parents who themselves might not feel very comfortable with their own literacy skills. Christie, is that something that you've encountered within the work of Always Dream? And if so, how have you dealt with that?
We have, and we also work with dual language learners, and our program is bilingual as well. We curate Spanish title books as well as bilingual books, and actually the texting platform we use is called Talking Points, and in real time, as the parents sign up to be a part of the program, designate a language, and then that is applied to their texting services. So when we are texting the parents, it will be in their home language. So that way they feel more comfortable and confident. And but as far as seeing, whether the families themselves feel comfortable, the first section of our program is all about picture walking. And, we really work with the families on, if this isn't in your home language, if it's, you're not comfortable with the literacy skills, here's a way to look at a book and sit down and tell a story with your child, whether or not you're reading the actual text. And, that is as beneficial as actually going through the book and reading. So, really giving them the knowledge of picture walking and, doing that with their child. And because it is on a digital platform, after the picture walking section of the program, we do introduce them to the read to me function on the platform. And we don't encourage it because we don't want the child to be just sit there by themselves. We do want the caregivers, the families, to be engaged, but it does help when there is that situation and they can sit there with their child and listen to the book as it's being read to them. And we have had families tell us anecdotally that, you know what, this has helped me as a parent to develop stronger literacy skills as well. So it's always nice to see that ripple effect, right? I mean, our target is the child in the family, but it does touch the other family members as well. So, another added benefit there.
That's a wonderful benefit of the technology, actually, that, that there is a read to me function as well for families who may find themselves in that situation. That's great. Carolyn, let me turn to you and ask a little bit of the same question. Whether families are maybe not, parents may not feel comfortable with their own literacy skills, or in the case of some of the families that you're working with as children are entering school, family members may simply not be feeling as comfortable with their level of English proficiency in some cases. How do you work to support those parents?
So, definitely sharing with parents the research about the importance of the home language development, and that oral language is actually a very important building block to literacy development. And so if their children have strong oral language skills, that's really going to help them. So, and actually one of the questions was related to storytelling as a way of sharing home language and culture. And so definitely encouraging families to tell stories, just to engage in conversation regularly in their home language, in the language that they're most proficient in, and that by modeling strong, language skills, that's going to be helping their children develop their own, oral language and eventually literacy skills. And then also Christie's suggestion of doing, just taking a even wordless book and then reading this, telling their own story in their home language will be very beneficial for children as well.
Wonderful. Great question in the chat from Dr. Kathy Grace from Mississippi is asking around, and this is a question, Christie, I actually had about that. One of the potential downsides of a technological approach is the question of internet access within the homes. I assume to access additional books on the platform, for example, they need to be able to download those onto the device, but the same challenge in some ways around rural areas probably holds true for all of the models, whether we're talking about broadband access, which may not be great in some communities, or transportation barriers to get to a pediatric care provider who might be participating in Reach Out and Read. How have you dealt with those issues, Christie?
So with the tablet, when we started this program about 7-8 years ago, we do provide data on the tablet for those families who need it. We've seen about 30 to 40% of our families had needed it pre-pandemic. As the pandemic hit, we saw that that digital divide was, the spotlight was shined on it. And in California, the school districts really stepped up and started to provide Wi-Fi and hotspots for the families, because otherwise distance learning was not going to happen with those students. So, we found actually through the pandemic, we had to provide a lot less data on the tablets. But yes, we try, looking to partner and find a way that, as this pandemic leaves us and we move forward, and perhaps the schools aren't going to continue that Wi-Fi and hotspot for their families, we will always provide that to make sure that every family we serve has the same access.
That's terrific. Kyle, how have you dealt with, I know through the First Book Marketplace, providers of all kinds and programs of all kinds, urban, suburban, rural are able to access books. How have you dealt with kind of questions of availability in rural areas?
Sure. Well, we really work hard to try to get as many educators signed up with us from rural settings. And honestly, I grew up in Appalachia, so I I know very well what access looks like in that area of the country. So we really work hard to get them signed up so that they have access to the marketplace, for example. But in addition to that, we also recruit support from companies like Intel. Intel, during the crisis, Intel stepped up with more than 14,000 computers, as well as a range of connectivity stipends that we were able to almost instantly make available to dozens of school districts, because obviously people were scrambling to make that connection. We also worked really hard with the New York Public Library and Digital Public Library of America on a program called Open Ebook. And it skews not for the youngest readers, but it's more of a chapter book focus. But it's, I think we've distributed more than 4 million codes free of charge that allow each kid to download up to 10 books on a smartphone. And, so we're always experimenting, recognizing what those barriers are, what organizations are already on the ground and schools are already on the ground, and trying to work through those so that we're not, so that we're strengthening what's already been built there.
Gotcha. Well, I have to say, it pains me to say so, because there are so many more things that I wish we had time to talk about, but we really are kind of through the hour and out of time, and want to give thanks to all of you who joined us and watched today, but more importantly, to our panelists who took time out of their busy schedules to contribute to a really rich conversation. Kyle Zimmer is president and co-founder of First Book. Brian Gallagher, Chief Executive Officer of Reach Out and Read. Carolyn Krolot is Director of Dual Language Programs at Early Edge, California. And of course, Christie Yamaguchi, founder of the Always Dream Foundation. Thanks to all of you for being with us. What a treat to have this conversation, and I hope that there's a way for us to continue it on down the road. We are so grateful for your time. I did want to mention quickly that we will be back, and we talked today a little bit about sort of what the pandemic has held for these early literacy programs, and potentially even some of the silver linings that maybe we have found. We're going to continue that conversation a month from now on September 7th, of our next installment, with a session that is going to be focused on COVID and the future of home visiting programs across the country. We are very lucky to be joined by the leaders of 4 of the nation's largest and most prominent evidence-based home visiting programs. Frank Didone, who is the CEO of Nurse Family Partnership, will be with us. Sarah Walzer of Parent Child Plus, Constance Gully of Parents as Teachers, and Kathleen Strader of Healthy Families America will join us on September 7th. And we hope that you will take the time to register, and we would love to see you then as well. Kyle, Christie, Brian, Carolyn, thank you again so much for being with us. And thanks to all of you for taking time out of your day to join this conversation. We will see you in a month. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.